My name is Larry Robertson. I'm Bishop of the Yukon, but I grew up in Toronto. This is where I was born, and this is where I grew up. And I went to my home parish. I never went to church when I was a kid until I was 17. Never entered a church. And my home parish was St. Brian's in Clarkson, on the other side of the city. But it was but yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Maybe what we can do is, if you wish, a little bit of an introduction to the Yukon and to where you might be going, and then we can show some slides here, a little bit about of the pictures. But before I do that, I want to just share with you, and I will pass these around if you want. This is, it actually came from Old Crow, where you're going. This is caribou, dried caribou meat. It's a standard that people will take for camping, and it's just dried meat. It's not smoked, it's dried. This is in the tradition of the Gwich'in and the Inuit people. They don't smoke because a lot of them live above the tree line where there's not a lot of trees, so they dry it. And if you want a piece, try a piece, by all means.
You're always up for that.
You're entering.
Is it salted, or is there juniper berries or anything like that?
No, it's dried in the sun.
In the sun.
In the sun, and there's no, it's dried in the sun, and it can only be done at certain times because we have a thing called flies. But I use that a lot of when I was traveling by skidoo from one community to another or hunting. We would have that in our pockets because they were. It was meat and it was nourishment and protein.
Saves you eating your boots.
Instead of eating your boots, you got it. So, but the Yukon was started as a diocese in 1880, I believe, 1883, somewhere in there. So it's been around for a few years. The people have been, the first missionaries went up there 150 years ago. When I came, we celebrated the 150th year of the first missionary that went up through the Yukon. So it was it's been around. It's now a population of about 40,000 people. 30,000 of them live in Whitehorse, and the rest are spread out in small communities. Anywhere from 500 or 600 where you're going, Crow, to a place like Haines Junction, which has probably got 1,000 people in it. So small communities. Once you leave the city, it's small communities area. It's a group of a mixed group of people. I would say 40% of the population is First Nation. I would think upwards to 20% of people are what we would call immigrants from various lands, people who have come in right away and have moved up into there. And the rest of us are people who have been around for a while and make up the population. Although people don't really know. I said, I guess, because I don't know. We don't go looking for those sort of things. They're there. People are there. People are people, and that's the way we look at it. There is a mixture. There are 7 official languages in the Yukon. Well, 8 including English, 9 including French. But there are 7 indigenous languages used into there. You're going into a place called Old Crow, where the Bantat Gwich'in people are. And the language you use there is what we would know as Gwich'in. Although everybody will speak English. In the church, there's a mixture of, throughout the town, it's a mixture of English and the local language of Gwich'in. I don't know what I can tell you about it. It's a land of a lot of mountains and a lot of lakes and a lot of streams, all connected by road. few airplanes. You have to get into Oak Grove by airplane. There are no roads going to Oak Grove. It's a fly-in, fly-out community, which gives it a unique history. Because these are people who live most of their lives in town. They don't dip out to their local neighbor, because there isn't any neighbor. And unless you're paying $400 or $500, it's an expensive sort of thing. So people are much more family oriented. They are people who are community oriented and therefore do things as a community. And they feel the joys and they feel the pains in the same way. Maybe we could, we'll show some of the slides here and see what happens from that. The other thing is, you let me talk. If you wait for me to stop, you may not get a word in. So if you've got a question, you stop me and say, but, whoa, hang on, because I can talk. I'm talking about my home. And I can talk lots about my home.
Could you just say something, sorry, I should have put my hand up.
Go ahead.
Could just say something about the self-government there, because it's different from a lot of the native reserves in Ontario and elsewhere.
Yes. There were no land claims made in the last couple of centuries in the north. So the land claims have been made within the past 40, 50 years. And what developed out of that is that people weren't worried too much about money. They wanted control of their land and people. Historically, they've seen, these are the last, if you wish, where the southern communities have sort of invaded. And so they have, when they did the land claims, they have self-government. Now that means they're part of Canada and they have to obey all the Canadian laws. But each community has a certain amount of autonomy in education, in health, in social services, in justice. What happens when somebody breaks the law. Those are sort of things. We are doing, we have things called justice camps where people who have broken the law are sent. And it's much more, they try to undo the traditional way of justice was through restoration as opposed to punishment. So they have much more control over what goes on in their land, what gets built in their land, about everything from pipelines to anything, really, and they have that control.
How long have they had that control?
In some cases, 20, 30 years. And it's made a real difference because you hear a lot in the South about the suicide rates in some of the First Nations. It's a lot less in the Yukon. It's a lot less because they have developed, this is their land and they feel it and they have control over it. And so there's more of a sense of pride, more of a sense of identity. Who am I? Who am I? We all want to know who we are. And oftentimes when we don't know who we are, we get depressed, we get all sorts of lost. And so you end up with, I can remember speaking to somebody in the South and he said, I don't know what I am. He was a Métis fellow. He says, either group sort of looks at me funny, and he gets, he was really down on himself. Whereas the people in the north, because of the land claims and because they have taken those initiatives, they have a sense of who they are. And one of the things that the church, I believe, can help anybody, including us down here, is an identity to know who we are as a child of God. Because it doesn't really matter who we are, as long as we know who we are. I had no identity, really. Growing up in Toronto in the slums, I grew up in welfare. People say, well, your name's Scottish. Oh, okay, whatever that is. My mom's French. Oh, okay, whatever that means. But when I became a Christian, I became part of the church and a family. And that gave me identity of who I was. Changed my life. When you know who you are, and you have confidence in who you are, your life can change. And that's what we see in the North, self-government. Should we show this?
Yeah, let's keep the terrible meat going around. I think it's personally it's delicious, so let's go.
I don't know what happened to it.
Is that the only one?
Lucy wants
I
to
didn't know.
I wasn't even surprised.
Is somebody hanging on to it?
Turn it around again.
I hope this thing works. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now this, I did not read these slides up. This comes from the priest in charge of Oak Crow. His name is Bert Chestnut, chestnut like the tree, and Bert like Bert Ernie. At least that's how he introduces himself. But he's been up there he's on his second year now. He's part of what we call the Ministry of Presence. These guys are volunteers. They come up for a year at a time to churches that have no minister. And so we give them a house and we bring them up, but they have to survive on their own. They have to have their own income. And he comes up and he just shares God's love with the people. And he's having a ball, to be honest with you. He's on his second year. So this is what he took to Nova Scotia, so you'll see the influences of that as we come. And as I say, that is looking out his window, and that's one of the hangings he had. He came from St. Andrews in Nova Scotia, and that's the church, St. Luke's Oak Crow. That's the one, and I was the infamous bishop that closed it down because it was too dangerous. The ground was sinking and the church was splitting apart. And if we didn't get those windows out of there, they would have all smashed. And that's some lovely stained glass windows.
Is that because of climate change, the permafrost?
I think that's a big part of it, although people will, the people that don't like climate change or don't agree with it will tell you it's other things. But that church was for 60 years, and and it also was before all the way they figured out how to build on permafrost and that. There is no pad on this one here. The new church is a nice pad and everything, so it's going to be built and stay a lot longer. But this is Oak Crow. All the buildings up here are, if you'll find, are log buildings. That's what they had to build with, and that's what they build with. He came up, when Bert got up, he came there right into a vacation Bible school at the cathedral. And that was Cave Quest. I think it was 2 years ago. Yeah. And he participates in them. In a ball, actually. We fun with the kids. And that's just there. That's the inside of our cathedral there, at the bottom. You could put the whole building inside your church. It's much smaller. This building here is the original log rectory. It's the original rectory that the ministers lived in. We use it now as a bunkhouse for spare people going through. We have a little conference room in there as well. And if I can ever get somebody to do a library, we have about 100,000 books we got to sort out. To get our bishop school going, we're going to need that.
So part of the archdiocese is below the tree line, and part of it is above the tree line.
Most of the Yukon is in the tree line.
So that's where the logs come from, then.
Yes. Yeah. You've got to get into the Arctic, diocese of the Arctic before you get above the tree line. But the tree line up here goes above the Arctic Circle. Oak Crow is above the Arctic Circle. So that means in the wintertime the sun disappears. And in the summertime the sun goes around in a circle.
Yeah, when we're there won't be nighttime.
Yeah,
They shouldn't be. What time were we looking at?
First week of
First
July.
week of July.
No, it'll be daytime, 24 hours.
Yeah. Full day.
Go crazy.
Yeah, you know, my kids, when they were growing up, we lived above the tree, above the Arctic Circle, and he'd say, "Dad, I'll go to bed when it's dark." It didn't work for us. So Old Crow is the community. Muntutquitchin is the nation that is there, the people that are there. They are the First Nations, what people used to call Indians. And Witchin is just a word that just means people of. So you have to say more than just Witchin. Witchin is now refers to a people, but if you want to say who they are the Muntutquitchin. They're the people from that area. Or you say the Tedlajay, Witchin, the people from Tedlajay. These are the Muntutquitchin. They are a nation of about there's about 600 or 700. They're part of, the nation goes actually, it's much bigger than the group, but the Quitchin people go from Alaska right through to NWT into a place called the Clavic. And it used to be all one big family. Now because the governments and all things have been broken up. And it's the only way to get in. And this, by the way, is the real moose pole.
What is the significance of a moose pole?
It's got a pole with moose antlers on it.
That's it.
And people love to take pictures on it, but there's no significance.
Says we are here.
People use markers like that in the land sometimes to show, because one entrance looks like another entrance, and they'll often have markers like that on a tree. But other than that, no, it's just something they put up. This is the moose pole.
So if I can just add a little bit, the reason it's fairly expensive for us to get there is we have to fly in, and the planes only take about 35 people.
Yeah.
And they take a lot of freight, so they have to fly in all the diesel that they need for their power, which is why they're beginning to switch to solar power. But Bert Chestnut said, when I was suggesting that we would leave Toronto on the 29th of June, stay overnight in Whitehorse, Bishop would help us get oriented, then we'd maybe go up to Old Crow on July the 1st. He said, well, that's Canada Day. There may be some people flying in for the celebrations. They may have, the seats are all booked, because a group of 12 of us takes up.
To the plane.
So that's why we're going to book our seats fairly soon in the new year, I think, and that will be when we solidify the dates. So that's why I've been a bit hazy up to now.
Yeah, and that's because that's the only way in or out. And you can see they've got two different kinds of planes coming in, but if you notice, they're all turboprop. Mm-hmm. I think they have a jet that goes in there, but not very much. And usually goes south to Vancouver as opposed to north.
How many flights a week usually come in?
There's actually 5 or 6. Nowadays it's pretty good.
And the airline is owned by...
They're owned by the Quitchin people.
By the Quitchin people, yeah.
It's called Air North, right?
Air North, yeah. And if you're a beneficiary, you get a discount. In the Yukon, the Air North segment used to give the churches, we would fly for a third of the price, which was extreme because when you were going up there, when I was in Inuvik having to go up to Homan Island, it was $1,400. So 1/3 of that is a lot cheaper than $1,400.
Sorry, before you continue, Ray and I have to go.
Okay.
As much as we'd like to stay, we have another engagement.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Great.
Linda.
Okay.
Bye, Graham.
This is very typical of many northern communities. The kind of buildings you're seeing there, they're older, often log. They don't seem to be they're weather worn. Some of the newer ones have nicer siding and that on them because they're packaged houses that come up from the south, but most of these that you're seeing are some of the older ones, and they're often log. Many of our places still have our main source of heat is wood. Many of them have furnaces and that too, but wood is, and most of them like wood. Even if they have a furnace, they want to have a wood stove because they just like the smell of wood heat. It's really nice. It's the most northerly isolated place in the Yukon. It's the only community we have to fly into.
Is the population fairly stable, or for these northern communities, or is there a net migration of young people going out looking for work, like there was?
Well, yeah, there's only so many jobs in Oak Grove, so that once those jobs are filled, so you have to go out. So we have a lot of people come down to Whitehorse. Whitehorse is the place where there's 30,000 people, and that's where everybody migrates. That's where the government is. That's where all the mining headquarters are. All of those sort of things. So people come there. 3 or 4 of the First Nation groups have their headquarters in Whitehorse because it's just so much easier and working. And so a lot of people will come out. A lot of people still are. They make their living by choice from the land, subsistence living, hunting, fishing, trapping, that sort of thing. There's still a lot of that, a lot of it by choice, a lot of it by there's nothing else to do. If you want to stay in Oak Grove, if you don't have one of the few jobs, you go. You either get out of there or you learn to live off the land.
Speaking of net migration, when my friend Bill King was in the South Pacific as a missionary about 25 years ago, the elders asked him at this village, should we they said the UN is offering, or maybe it was the World Bank, is offering us internet connections, and he said, don't do it, it'll destroy your way of life. So they put it off for a few years to their benefit. Is there internet there?
The Yukon is probably the most electronic savvy people you'll ever meet. Because they have to. When you've got even driving, you go 4 or 5 hours between communities. Communications are extremely important to us. And so almost everybody has a cell phone. The internet is there. Video education through most of the communities have a center of place where the nursing stations will use to contact the doctors, all video-wise, where education can take place with the teacher being elsewhere, so you have distance education, that sort of thing going through. And most of us all have laptops, computers, that sort of thing, because they're needed. My phone is my Bible. There's several books that I read. I mean, if I had to take all these things with me, I'd never get anything. I'd never have any clothes. Because you need those. And now it's all done electronically. But electronics are like anything else. There's an on and off switch, and you have to teach your children to use it or not use it, and when to use it and when not to use it. And this is, you're probably at the most isolated. The phone systems and things break down a lot the further north you are, but they're there. That's Bert there at the church. With the church sign. That's they say the old St. Luke's, the building. This is the inside of it. That's up behind the altar. This work that you see in there, and you'll be able to go through this thing, the beadwork on some of these things is phenomenal, the artistry that they have. And you'll see it, you'll have a chance to see some of that. They are phenomenal sort of artists when it comes to beadwork, when it comes to stitching, carvings, these sort of things. There is the Archdeacon MacDonald Memorial Church, and it's been closed down for decades. But that was a church that was built in his, when they needed to build a new church, that's what they called it. It shows how much importance they put on an individual. Because have you ever seen an Anglican church that's named after a man? It's always a saint of somebody. And this was a saint, but you know, the problem Anglicans have, the only time we accept a saint is when the Roman Catholics make it. We don't make our own saints. So the only ones we ever accept are the Roman Catholic ones. And, you know, I think you take a man like Archdeacon MacDonald who gave his life for the people he served and for his God. And that outside was built there for the transportation up until the roads came was by river all the time. You'll get a chance to see the bush, and it's, you know, it's amazingly thick to try and go through. Travel was always by river, up and down the river, by canoe, by paddle wheel, by anywhere they could get. Now they have motorboats with 100 horsepower kickers on the back of them. This is outside the church along the way here. It's in the summertime. People gather with picnics for gatherings. This is inside the community hall. It's a jigging contest. You guys are familiar with jigging? The form of square dancing? It's a form of square dancing, and they call it jigging. And it's one of the pastimes. It's a favorite form of dancing in the north.
Now, a jig in folk dancing is usually a solo piece or two people sort of trying to outdo
You got it.
the others. So that's what
You got it, yeah. They have the wedding, which is very much the same as any Anglican wedding that you see, but afterwards the party begins. And sometime in the evening, the bride and the groom step out, and the women surround the groom, and the men surround the bride. And then the music starts, and it's jigging. And so the bride and the groom dance with each other, with all the men, or the groom, obviously the bride dances with the men, and the groom dances with the ladies. And I can tell you when it was my turn to go out, the people really like it when you participate. You know, because the bishop who's dancing and jigging with the bride, you know. But it's a lot of fun. And as the song comes, at a certain point, these two circles blend. So I end up dancing with my wife, and we are surrounded, and the bride and the groom are dancing together. And they call that the wedding dance. You start off separate and you end together, and you find your own spouse or your own boyfriend or girlfriend or wherever you went. And it's just a lovely sort of thing. But jigging is dancing. We love to have fun. Life can be so hard, and death can come easy with starvation at times, and historically. That when you have fun, you enjoy it. When life is good, enjoy it. You share it. If you've got something that somebody else needs, you share it. It's that sort of a communal lifestyle that we have. It's just I'm turning my back on people. Baptism is always a fun time. It's anything for a party. Anything to gather together, to enjoy being together. You know, when you think of it, that's what Christ is all about, is bringing people together and care and love and joy. And you see it in their lives. And this is a baptism. There is no church. They're worshiping in the Heritage Center. And that's what you're looking at now. I'm hoping maybe by the time you go there'll be a church. What they're doing is the old Hudson Bay store. They're moving over, and it's going to become renovated to become the new church. This is a wedding, and this is a priest stole. That's moose hide, beaded work, and that's birch gloves. I suggested that maybe you should tell them that the bishop would love her. Hasn't worked yet. But both of those are moose-hined and beaded. It's as well, and the women, if you notice the traditional dress, the vest the man wears at the wedding, some of them are very traditional. You'll find, I've seen this lady, she's in a lovely white dress, very traditional Anglican, fancy thing. But the men tend to dress up in the traditional dressing with the vest and that. That way we don't have to wear a tie. This is a gravesite. If you notice what they do, and this comes from the old religion and the old tradition of when you buried a person, you provided, some of the groups would actually build homes over the graves, and in it they would put there's special things like maybe a necklace, something they wore. Sometimes you'd find money in there, and different things. But usually it was something special that they had, something they carried. And it meant a lot to them, and so they were there. And when people go, they see these things, and they remember the person whom they represented. You notice there's a cross there, and up here we dig our own graves. We don't have any funeral homes or people that dig. The community digs the graves. We build the boxes. We make our own crosses. Can't tell you how many crosses I've made for services and funerals. The community builds the box. We then the ladies dress the body. If they die locally, they dress the body and get it ready, and we carry the body from the church to the gravesite. The family builds and digs the grave, and we bury them there. We do everything we possibly can for this person who has died, this loved one who has died. And then we go back and we remember him, and we remember the stories about him and the lives and afterwards. And then a year later they have what they call the gravestone potlatch, which is our final goodbyes to this man or this lady. And they gather around the graveside, and usually, because they'll often buy and have sent up one of the gravestones. I think it's outlandishly, but it's special for them, and that's okay. They pay great money to have this thing shipped up and put it in. Many of them don't, but that final year, after a year of they're not in mourning and that, but they're remembering. And if you know anything about grieving, healing from grieving takes time, and this is that year.
Where does the year come from? I'm thinking in Judaism, there's a year and there's a special prayer when we grieve.
No, we tell the year by the season. We tell the year by the season. The season of, you have winter and you have spring, you have breakup, you have mud. But you've got those seasons. And they wait a season. They wait a year, a cycle to go through. Now we have calendars like everybody else, but at the time it was, you waited a year, and then the people gathered back again to remember him, sort of one last time, and life goes on. Life goes on. This is inside again. He's getting ready for the Christmas Eve service. Christmas Eve, I can tell you that was too small. At Christmas Eve, half of the town will be going to church. And he said, my first one we really screwed up because we had it in here. The second one was in the community hall. the town may be 600 people, 250, 300 would be in that church service.
Is the Anglican Church the only church in?
Oh yeah, they're all Anglican.
Yeah.
When I was in Holman Island, town of, when we were there were 300 people. Christmas Eve, there were over 200 people trying to cram into this little church. Normally, if you crammed them in, there'd be 80 to 100 people, which would I normally get about 100 people. And Christmas Eve, I would get 200 because you literally couldn't get any more in there, and people were standing outside.
Can you tell a story about the Pope?
Oh, well, the Pope was coming north. This was 20 years ago now, and they were looking for something special for him, a special place to go, and they said, "Oh, Crow, it's an isolated community, it'd just be ideal." And they phoned up the town, and they said, "Would you like the Pope to come?" And they said, "We would love the Pope to come." And arrangements started. I mean, they were a month or two into the arrangements until somebody realized that every single member of the band was Anglican. There were no Roman Catholics there at all. And they phoned up and said, "Well, why did you say the Pope could come?" And the leader said, "Well, he's a holy man. Of course he's welcome here. We would love to see him." But he went to Fort Simpson instead. But you see, denominations mean nothing to them. We're Christians. I will go in, and I've been invited to do services at the Roman Catholic Church. I obviously refuse to do communion, although they've asked me to do it. And I think your bishop might have a problem there. But I would go in, and I have had permission from their bishop to share God's word with them. And if we were having communion, they would come and share with us. We have an open policy. If somebody puts their hand out at the communion table, you put something in it. Christ's body is for all who want to come. We don't have any regulations whether you're Anglican, Baptist, Pentecostal, Roman Catholic, doesn't matter. You put your hand out, we're going to put the body of Christ in it for you. That's what love is all about, sharing of love. So that's the community, that's for the last 4 or 5 years, that's what the church would have looked like on a Sunday morning in the Heritage Center. Still that way. Hopefully by the time you get there, though, there may be another place. These are traditional. Up here, obviously this is a craft show. Most of us wear mitts. Gloves are cold because of the separations in the fingers. You'll find most of us wear mitts, and usually with a pair of gloves inside. At least I did, especially when I was driving Skidoo. It was so important. Down here is food. This looked like a summer festival of some sort, maybe July long weekend, who knows? But they were making caribou head soup here. Caribou head soup, by the way, is delicious. And I don't know how much time do we have. Not long, right?
Another 10-15 minutes.
Okay, then I won't tell you the story. But it's they eat natural foods. The natural foods are there. They eat caribou and fish is normal. Moose, beaver. These are all part of our lifestyle, part of our food chain. That's what we eat. I mean, you can, if you want to pay $10 or $12 for a pound of hamburger at the store, you can, or you can grind up moose meat for nothing. And I got to tell you, moose meat and my kids grew up on caribou fish, and they didn't seem to do too bad at all. And we still eat a lot of the local food. Hunting is a big part of the economy of our people, and a certain amount of trapping. Greenpeace hasn't completely destroyed it, but did a good job of destroying the economy and livelihood of much of our people. But
Sorry, I have to duck in.
yeah, okay. This is traditional. She's skinning or tanning, beginning to get the skin ready, the moose hide ready. And they will scrape out all clean with their knives. And their knives are sharpened differently depending on what it's for. A scraper is sharpened only on one side, so they can scrape the fat and the stuff off it. Other knives are both knives that are used for cutting, this sort of thing. He's got this thing here because I think it's a little bit of shock value. What they did for the cleaning of the tide, the tanning of it, they would use the brains of the moose or the caribou as a way of, it's a cleaning thing. I've eaten moose brains, not moose brains, but caribou brains, and they're fine. I had this thing, and she said, "Well, it's better if it's cooked." It's some of you won't see too much of this because it won't be too dark, unless you get a storm, and then it does get dark. The beauty of God's creation, you're surrounded by mountains and lakes. It's just a phenomenal thing. When you land in Whitehorse, there's mountains on both sides of you, and you're landing alongside the Yukon River. It's just, I drive and I'm amazed that God has put me there, and I thank Him every day for the beauty of His creation. And you won't see any of this, but Northern Lights, because you gotta have darkness. And you're not going to see any of that. But it's, the heavens declare the glory of the Lord. And I've seen lights like these here, and you sit back and it reminds me a lot of, my wife says it reminds her of the rainbow, of God's promise, of His love to always be with us and to protect us and care for us. And when I look at when I look at the Northern Lights, I keep going back and remembering His promises. It's just and one more, I think this is Bert's favorite picture. He took that outside of his, on the porch of his house. He said, "I've never seen a cross in the sky like that before." Proclaiming Christ and Him crucified. It's the land that you're going into is an amazing land. If you read any of Robert Service's poetry, he writes a lot about it, and the Spirit of the Yukon. There's several very good poems in it. Just can rip you, as well as the cremation of Sam McGee or the shooting of Dan McGrew. But the land. People say when you go up there, the land affects you one way or another. You want to come back, but you end up staying. I went north for 2 years in 1976. I just never left. It became our home. Our children grew up there. It's their home. The only home they know. And we'll retire, and my wife will decide where we're going to go, but she's thinking more and more of staying. And I'd be happy to stay. But there's something about the land and the Creator's touch that you get when you're up there. And if you allow yourself to have the Spirit of God touch you through His creation, through the beauty of His creation, through the mountains, through the animals that you may meet as you're going down the road, the moose or the caribou or the lynx, and you see them, and maybe only a glimpse as they go by. Or the grizzly, I stopped a lady, and I'll end with this story. We had people from the Maple Leaf Foundation, which is the England from England. And there's a couple of them because they'd given us money and they wanted to come up and we were showing them through. And I drive up over this hill and there are 2 grizzly bears on the other side. And she said, "Can you stop?" I said, "Okay." She said, "We want to go and take a picture." I said, "Don't you dare get out of that. Don't you dare." She says, "What do you mean?" I said, "You don't get out of that. You do not. If you want, you can lay down, you can roll down the window, but you're not getting out of this." "Why?" I said, "Because those are grizzlies. those will eat you." And anyways, they can't be that bad. I said, "You don't get out of the car." And so they're taking pictures, and there's 2 of them now. One has a monitor on it, so it's being tracked. Eh? They start to come up over the road, and I start moving the car. And she says, "Wait, I haven't got a good picture." I said, "I'm not stopping this car." And the bears came over, and it started chasing the car. She said, "That bear's chasing us." I said, "I can outrun it." You don't take chances with wildlife, and you never ever take a chance with a grizzly because they. But she said, "Oh, can I get out and have a picture?" I said, "No." And 2 weeks later, I sent her a picture of this wildlife fellow a girl lady actually, who had they had to sedate one of the bears, and she has this grizzly paw. And the grizzly paw is like that. Wow. And she's holding it up, and I take this picture and I send it to her in English, in England, and said, "This is why you can't get out of the car." But hopefully you'll enjoy it. We'll try and get you, when you come to Whitehorse, to get you around to see some of the things there, and maybe we can talk a little bit about what's available there. And then Bert and the community of Oak Crow are really looking forward to seeing you, and you'll have fun. So, yeah. Any questions? Any other questions?
Is there a high school level education in your community, or is it all by video?
In Oak Crow, every community has school. Most of them have a sort of high school, which will get you a grade 10 in theory. But if you want to go to university, you have to go to West to finish school.
When I grew up in Ottawa, and the Diocese of Ottawa was very involved with the Drive for the North. At the time, they did bales and all kinds of support going up, and there was no high school education programs in that area, and so they brought teenagers down to live with families in Ottawa and Montreal, and so that they could go to the local schools. But the social dislocation was just huge.
It's still a problem.
I don't think they have tried to continue the program because the families, well-meaning though they were not equipped to deal with these kids who were down for a serious party in the South.
They're different. I mean, you're brought down
a different reality, and they just went
a whole different worldview.
Landed in Aladdin's cave.
Yeah, education is always an issue. If you want your child to go to university, it means you got to come to Yellowknife usually, pretty much all the time, and because the local education. My kids grew up. In the last couple of years, we sent them to live with my family so that they could get an education. One time we sent one of them out to sort of a private school that somebody agreed to pay for, and I said, fine. Biggest mistake I ever made, but but normally they would go out because you had to go to the centers, Yellowknife, Whitehorse, Iqaluit. Those had decent high schools that would prepare you for university. The high schools that are in these other communities don't prepare you for university. They get you a grade 10 so that you can apply for, get onto the apprenticeships, to apply for a lot of government jobs which have a minimum of grade, of grade 10. And in theory you can get you a grade 12, but you end up doing a year or two of intro college before you can actually get into the college system, because you got to upgrade. It's that sort of so you do what you can. There's more and more pushing for what we call vocational training. Training, identifying what needs to be done and what the trades that are there, and then training the people for them, which is much more practical than trying to
import more electrical.
Well, it's just, you've got to look at, because many professions, if you want to do that profession, you got to go. You can't stay home. You can't be in the community. There's no jobs. It's always an issue. There's jobs. Yeah. Anything else?
Music.
Music?
What about music in the community there?
What do you mean?
Do they sing? Is there a choir? Do they have drumming circles?
There's a drum team in there, a community drum dancing group. They love to sing, square dance. That's an issue. Jigging, obviously. Singing is a big part. The Christian hymns, they tend to sing really slow, But I tell you, if you're learning the language, go to church, because they sing so slow and it allows you to read it better. When I was learning the Inuktitut language, one of the blessings I had, because I had to take service, and they would sing so slow, and I tried to wind them up a few times, but it's hard. But that's a cultural thing. And yet they'll sing, they'll square dance something on into the night.
Thank you.
So we have 8 spaces for youth and 4 accompanying adults. 3 of whom already have their places. So the 4th one we may have to draw lots because a number of adults are interested in going. But the size is obviously limited. And you probably need to decide for sure by a couple of weeks from now, if as the youth people, if you want to go, because then the preparations begin in earnest. Fundraising. We've got a day set aside on the PD day in November 17th. And Compañeros, which we all know about, is running an urban indigenous program. And they're going to do a day for us on November 17th of learning about some of the things we need to be aware of. We're going to do the blanket exercise.
Oh, great.
There's going to be what they're calling Indigenous Awareness 101. So, if you know you want to go, tell me. And if you can go, and I know it's a problem for people in college because you don't get PD days, but they're on strike right now, right? So if they're still on strike, you can come. So
Let's hope not.
I'm going to hand these out. This is the information about November 17th, and that's when we really get started in preparing ourselves for this trip.
I'm going to call an audible on you and say that for the sake of preparation for the 17th, we need to know who you are and what you're coming for the 15th. That gives us 2 days to finalize details, but we need the team together. The other side of that is if we want to buy our plane tickets early in the new year, which we do, that means we have to have our funds raised. Unlike when we've traveled with Compañeros, where like 50% of our fee isn't due until the month before we go. The only associated major cost that we need to fundraise is the flights, and it's a lot of money. And we need that money when we buy the tickets. So there is no, we'll get it in June. No, we need that money by January, so we need to be fundraising hard through the winter. So we need to have the team pulled together. So I'm saying November 15th, that's when the team is finalized. That's what you've got until. That's the question, Grace?
Yes, the question about like adults because we've only one spot left. How will you decide the one person that goes?
I'm thinking a cage match, but
Same. I've been saying we'll draw lots. Like we'll literally put the names in a hat.
yeah, or get Excel to spit a random and
Yeah.
No, don't do that.
so
Don't draw lots.
yes.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Or we
Your youth.
Yeah, your youth.
Okay.
Yeah. In the Anglican Church, your youth till you're about 35.
Should I be a youth? Am I a youth? Yeah. Should I be a youth?
No.
Not quite. But we're going to help you fundraise.
Oh, I have a list of fundraising ideas I would like to be in charge of.
We should teach you how to make panic for communion.
Yeah.
That's crumble.
That's good. We need to wrap it up because it's late. Bishop must be exhausted. He's been up since 6 this morning. So you will see him again if you're on the trip because we will begin in Whitehorse. And,
And if you stay over at Northern Apostles, that's my parish. I also have a parish as well as being a bishop. I'm bored. So we sleep over at the church here.
that'd be great.
That's a possibility anyway, whatever you guys plan.
Chris?
Are we gonna have another meeting going over what we're doing, where we're staying, and what we need? Like
We're
basically
going to have lots more meetings.
Oh, yeah. That would be something that once we have a
before we
team.
need to be finalized? You know what I mean?
I understand what you mean, like a little bit more information about the week, what you'd be doing, who you'd be going with.
That
Possibly, yes.
Bert suggested we do a Skype call with him sometime.
That would be good.
So we can meet Bert, who's going to be hosting us, and we can talk to him about exactly what it's going to look like. So, yeah, we'll try and do that soon.
Now, I do have to tell you that if you're looking for a detailed list of on Wednesday at 9 o'clock you're going to do this, and it don't work that way in the north.
No.
It never has, but you will.
It might change an hour
He
before
should
you're
be
planning.
able to get you an idea of what the sort of things you're going to be doing. Some of the sort of things that you might be doing is some of the fun things. As the elders, you get to, hopefully you can get some of the elders together and they can talk to you about what it was like when they were children. This would be before power, before electricity, before the roads came in. Before, well, there are no roads there. But they have stories about the early life, which is often phenomenal. And once they get them going, they've got all sorts of funny anecdotes and those sort of things. There is what I call, and Bird was saying, I'm hoping he's going to do it, is a dress-up night. It's the dress-up night, where they get some of the traditional clothing of the people, and they bring it in, and then people come in and, well, they have a look at it, learn a little bit about it, but they also get pictures with them on it. You get a traditional packing parka, for the baby, and the back sleeve, or the baby belt. The Gwich'in have baby belts, and they have traditional parkas, and you can often tell where a person's from by the designs on the parkas. So things like that, you learn a little bit about the clothing, and it's fun. They're talking about doing some work in the community. I'm not quite sure what that means. Maybe you saw some pictures of the grave site. They do spend a lot of time fixing and cleaning up and around because that's an important part of their culture. That's an important part of any culture, actually. But what those who, whether they'll have a dance for it, I'm not sure. But an opportunity to learn with the chief and the band, you'll really enjoy it.
If you go to the St. Aidan's Facebook page, there's a video on about solar power being brought into Old Crow. There's a great video of people driving up and down in their skidoos and their ATVs and waving to the camera, but converting from dependence on diesel to using the sun, specifically within Old Crow.
Some of the government buildings are putting these big solar screens up on the sides of the window. And outside of Bert's house, there's a pole with this big screen on it. And they're actually going to move it with them. So they're hoping eventually that they'll heat the mission house with solar power.
Is there a way of storing the energy over the winter?
Batteries. No, but they have batteries. Big batteries. And the government will buy any unused power, the government will buy back. So you can actually make money on this thing if you have a big enough thing.
Excellent.
Would you pray with us to close off this meeting, please?
Love to. Creator, we thank you for your presence here amongst us, that you call us together into one big family. We pray that you give us a desire to learn from each other and about each other, that in the learning we may better live with each other and care for each other. We pray, O Lord, for this group who are going up to Oak Crow. We pray that you give them the funding that they need. We pray that as they come with open hearts and be received with open hearts. That together they would help each other and learn from each other and grow together. Father, we ask your blessings upon each person here. We ask your blessings in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Be with us now and always. Amen.
Amen.